This is something we should have done in December, and it was a horrible mistake, in my judgment, not to complete the funding for FY25 in the previous Congress. Under the Biden administration, we would have had roughly the same characteristics. We would have had an incoming Trump administration, an incoming Senate. I think we would have gotten substantially the same deal. And now we're trying to do budget reconciliation, which is a much more important task, and yet we face, as you point out, a government shutdown. Republicans have to stick together. We should use the Fiscal Responsibility Act numbers from last year and negotiate with the Senate, now a Republican Senate, who wants to spend a little bit more on defense, and get this behind us so that we could go to the main event of focus on reforming regulation, reforming productivity in the federal government, reforming spending, extending pro-growth tax cuts.
Give us your sense of how much optimism you have that's going to happen here. I know there's a lot of nervousness and apprehension that time is running short. There are different views on this. We were spending the last few weeks talking about will it be one bill or two bill or three bills. I know you've been involved in the same game there on the Hill. Do you see a path forward here? How much clarity do you have at this point?
Yeah. Well, first on Tom's question about FY25, finishing FY25 before March 14th, I have medium confidence. The worst case scenario would be to continue a CR till like September 30th. First of all, once you hit April 1st, you'll have a 1% across the board cut in FY25 spending. And CRs are terrible for government management. We'll end up spending billions more because we operate under a CR. We won't be able to start any new programs at the Defense Department, which is a priority for the administration. So that makes me lean to, yes, we'll get something done on March 14th on fiscal 25. As to budget reconciliation, the big game, I do support one bill here in the House because I think that's how we hold the Republican coalition together best here. And as you know, Senator Graham in the Senate's taking a different approach.
Congressman Hill, what is the view from the Longworth House office building of what we're seeing the White House do? Of course, the historical precedent has been that Congress controls the purse, makes decisions about funding, and we are seeing this administration take a more active role, shall we say, in determining what gets funded and what doesn't. How much comfort do you have with ceding some of that power to your friends and colleagues in the other branch, the executive branch of Pennsylvania Avenue?
Well, I think you find on money that's appropriated, Congress does control those purse strings and they direct that spending. But in the broad swaths of federal spending, you have directions to agencies, spend this money on these general topics. And that's what the appropriated money says. And then you have Article 2 authority with a lot of discretion about how to spend it. And I think that's what President Trump's attempting to look at. Is the spending done at the end of the Biden administration and proposed to be spent here in the first few weeks of his administration? Is it in alignment with his goals that he has in foreign policy, for example, at USAID? And that's a classic Article 2 authority to take a look at that, make sure it's in alignment with their policies. With that said, you can't do these things without both the legislative branch and the executive branch ultimately working together.
Then, Frenchel, you and I have known each other since time began, and I've never seen a private citizen in the Oval Office standing there with his arms crossed like he owned the high ground. You are one of the rare beasts that came to Congress actually running a business in Little Rock. What's your advice to your fellow moderate brethren of the Democratic and Republican persuasion? What do they need to do in the coming days?
Well, first, let's look at DOGE, Tom. It's a good idea to go in and look for efficiency in government in the executive branch and make recommendations to the legislative branch when you want to spend money differently or have a different number of full-time equivalent positions in an agency. That's perfectly a good suggestion. And we haven't done it in years. I'd say since 9/11, the government's been focused on growing, not remotely focused on productivity or realigning or investing in technology or doing anything in a different way. We've been completely distracted by the war on terrorism, the 2008 crisis, and then the recovery from that, and then the pandemic. So I think it's overtime to scrape the barnacles from the ship of state when it comes to regulatory policy, personnel policy. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and I would encourage the administration to plan, communicate, and consult with Congress on how the best way to do that is.